right into Lucy?
Well, you can introduce Lucy.
Okay.
Sorry, Lucy, I didn't mean it like that.
Start the recording. Just be careful here, guys.
I'm sure she
Yeah, we're being recorded, you all.
Okay, well, first off, you all know that we're not meeting in December. So, you know, if you show up and nobody else is there, don't feel rejected. We are having the party, so that's a whole different thing. And we just covered that. Now, our January speaker is going to be Jessie, yes?
We're having a salon.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Thank you.
The
On the 28th.
28th, yeah, thank you. And everybody is aware of what that's all about? Does that need explanation? Okay.
I think we're good.
All right.
Tony, you show up on the 2012 roster, not before.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. My screen just flipped. Hold on just a second. Okay, well, I'm going to fake it then because the screen has disappeared on me. All right. Our January speaker is going to be Jessie Bird, Sherilyn's contact. Sherilyn got in touch with me and suggested him. He's a children's author. He's on the NPR board, National Public Radio. And he works with people on branding and promotion, all aspects of it. So very, very interesting guy. Then in February, we have Barbara Myers, who you've been hearing about for a while. She is a minister, but she works with people who have mental illness problems, but live in the community. And a lot of them, you know, have very serious problems. And, you know, who they are, what they're really like, not the TV or the movie version, you know, what life is like with them and for them. Then in March, we have Mariana Evans. Bob Garfinkel introduced us to her. And Mariana Evans has a series of books about an archaeologist / detective.
Yep.
And
Very interesting books.
You go ahead, Bob. Tell us a little more about her.
Oh, she was originally in Florida when I first got introduced to her books back in the early 2000s. And she's got this archaeologist who winds up investigating murders almost by accident. So they're very, you know, as you would say, a page turner. And now she's in, I think, Oklahoma. Isn't that where she's at now?
I think so.
Yeah. And her books are, like I say, they're page turners. Very interesting. Whether you're into murder mysteries or not, because she also talks a lot about archaeology and such. And I hope that Nancy Kurteman will join us for when Ann talks. So that's it for now. I'll let her introduce herself. Would you say she's in March or April?
March.
March.
In April, we have Jen Glantz, and Jen is Tisha's contact. And I've got to say, she seems really, really entertaining and a lot of information. She's written over 1,000 articles for places like NBC, Business Insider, Yahoo, Glamour Magazine, Forbes, New York Times, CNBC. She became a digital contributor for TLC, and she's the founder of a viral business called Bridesmaid for Hire, and the creator of the project, Finally the Bride. And the founder of the blog, The Things I Learned From, and the voice of the podcast, You're Not Getting Any Younger, and the founder of the coaching business, Jen and Juice. I have no idea what that is. But last but not least, she's also the author of the Amazon books, All My Friends Are Engaged, and Always a Bridesmaid for Hire.
Sounds like a theme there.
Those are published by Simon and Schuster. She's been on a lot of TV shows, but apparently she really likes talking about her work. And when you're talking about self-promotion, she really knows how. So that brings us to the end of this little section. And then in May, May and June, we have a couple of people that we're talking to. Again, if you find somebody who just seems astonishingly good, especially when you're listening to speakers who really have a great background, don't be shy. The worst they can do is say no. And if they say yes, send them to me. In this job, I get by with help from my friends.
Amen.
And
Okay.
today,
Woohoo!
okay, I don't even know. Maybe we should just start with the applause. Okay, Lucille Lang Day has more degrees than you can shake a stick at. Starts out with an MFA in English, and then it goes into science and mathematics. And is it just one PhD?
Only one, that's right.
Only one. She has had, I should let you talk about your background, but she has such an astonishing life story. And you'll remember I told you about her memoir, Married at 14. And she went from, look what she's built herself into. I mean, just starting there, look who she is and what she is. She has a publication list that could choke a horse. And she will, she'll tell you all about that. But today she's going to be talking about eco-poetry. And you all know that that protest poetry is a very, very big part of American and European tradition. And for that matter, Bob Dylan, you got the Nobel Prize for it. I don't know if you've gotten the Nobel Prize yet. I don't think so, but somebody nominate
yet.
her. Lucille Lang Day, everybody.
Yay!
Thank you very much, Nudie. I'm the publisher of Scarlett Tanager Books, and I'm also co-editor of this anthology, Fire and Rain, Eco-Poetry of California. And so I'll start out by talking about this anthology. It includes 149 poets, and they ranged in age from 18 to 96 when the anthology was published in 2018. My co-editor, Ruth Nolan, and I are giving all of the profits from this anthology to 7 environmental organizations. And I've put links in the chat to the anthology, to my press, Scarlett Tanager Books, to my personal website, and also to my latest book, Birds of San Pancho and Other Poems of Place. I trained as a biologist before I became a poet. And so matters of biology have always been central and important to my poetry. And this anthology, Fire and Rain, is an anthology of poems about California ecosystems. And it's divided into 8 sections corresponding to major bioregions of California. For example, there's a section on coast and ocean, and there's a section on the coastal redwoods. There's a section on the desert. And Ruth and I called the book Fire and Rain because fire and rain are so important in shaping all California ecosystems. So we both love the James Taylor song, but the title of the book is not an homage to him. It's a recognition of the importance of fire and rain in shaping California ecosystems. As it turns out, fire has a good and normal role to play in shaping California ecosystems. There were fires here long before there were people. They were mostly started by lightning. Some of the conifers, including the giant sequoias, have evolved so that their cones don't open to release the seeds until there are fires. Also, a lot of the trees have evolved to endure fires, and that includes the redwoods. However, now things have gotten completely out of hand. California just had its worst fire season ever. And what's changed from what was going on historically is the effects of human activity. First, there's global warming, which is brought on and linked to the burning of fossil fuels. And then this has resulted in California having its highest temperatures ever this year. And also for the past 15 years, most of the years have been drought years. So not surprisingly, when everything's very hot and dry, it catches fire very easily, and those fires are hard to put out. And this is exacerbated by population growth. People are moving into wild areas that are prone to fires, and so we get more loss of lives in buildings when there's a fire. And then on top of all of that, we have a reckless power company, PG&E, that has consistently put profits before people and safety. And PG&E has many power lines that are not properly insulated, and when they blow down, they start a fire. And also, they have many transmission towers that are more than 100 years old. So a better solution than turning off our electricity when it's windy and dry, a better solution would be to replace the old transmission towers and put in insulated power lines. But that would really be minimal. The best solution of all, in my opinion, would be to put all of the power lines in wild areas underground. We're now in the midst of a worldwide environmental crisis, one manifestation of which is these escalating temperatures and reduced rainfall in California. But California is not alone. For the past 50 years, global temperatures have been increasing faster than at any other time in human history, and dozens of species are going extinct every day. And there's a worldwide ongoing loss of habitat. A poetry collection obviously can't solve these problems, but it can illuminate them and it can generate discussion. And I hope that Fire and Rain will do that. Part of my impetus to create this anthology, Fire and Rain, was to call attention to environmental destruction and change through phenomena such as fires, floods, and earthquakes, as well as such human impacts as pollution, logging, climate change, and loss of species and habitat. But that wasn't all. I also wanted to celebrate the extraordinary beauty and diversity of California's ecosystems. That's important too. And an eco-poem does not have to be a downer about fires and floods and species going extinct. An eco-poem can also show us the beauty and power of what still exists in nature and inspire us to protect it. So now what I'll do is I'll read just a few poems from Fire and Rain. And I'll say the fire and the poems that are literally about fire and rain are through in every section of the book, because fire and rain, as I said earlier, affect all of California ecosystems. So I'm going to read a poem first by Maureen Epstein. She's a Mendocino poet. Poem is in the Coastal Redwood section of the book, and it's called Redwood Grove After Fire. Crunch of black fragments underfoot, faint whiff of char. Earth beside the trail, fresh broken, where a burned tree fell, as they sometimes do years later. Cave walls of the hollow giants gleam with fresh scorch. Ferns have returned to the flat, though sparser now, more logs among them fallen. We celebrate survival. Redwood sorrel has spread its green salve over ashy ground. Warty and wrinkled, the old ones stand in their accustomed silence. So that poem with the appearance of the redwood sorrel also shows the regeneration that occurs naturally after a fire. And next I'll read a rain poem. This is by Kathleen McClung, and it's a sonnet called Gualala Winter. Keep dreaming of gray deer asleep in woods, as sheets of rain claim every living thing, tailor bees, bracelet cones, chipmunks, hawk broods high up in nests that sway but last, each wing leaf stem of fern soaked through, wet to the core, endures these January storms we track, evade behind our screens, our twice-locked doors. Nervous, we curse old roofs, new leaks, come back, mend quietly what's torn, listen to wind, confuse it with Pacific surf close by, cars crossing flooded roads, gray deer may find logs hollowed out, may curl inside, stay mostly dry. Under mossed bark or not, our sun will rise, night storms will end, we animals open our eyes. And next I will read a desert poem by Noreen Lawler. This is called Creosote. She said she could smell the rain in the creosote. Put some slender branches behind her ear. Tiny gray-green berries fell, stuck to the strands of her hair. She grew up in the desert, says it only shows itself to certain people. I do not smell the rain in the creosote. I smell its tenacity, though. How it stands up to windstorms. Its roots suck water out of sand. It puts on yellow flowers in the spring. There is a living ring of it in Mojave that is carbon dated to be 11,700 years old. Since the last ice age, one mother plant cloned itself. They are all connected underground. Take 20 years to grow a foot. In Joshua Tree, we have a forest of it they want to clear cut, put up a gated community with 248 densely packed houses. I do not think they smell the rain. I think they smell only money. And I'll just read one more poem from this book, a poem of my own called Muir Woods at Night, and it's also in the Coastal Redwoods section of the book. Rust-colored ladybugs, clustered like grapes, mate on horsetails that wave by a creek where silvery salmon spawn and leap when the sandbar breaks at the gate to the sea. The ladybugs have come hundreds of miles from valley to coast for this singles bash. The females are choosy. They twiddle the males, seeking appendages padded with fat. And all around, high in redwood burls, on elk clover leaves and in the rich soil, the meaning of life is to stroke and prod under a humpbacked moon dissolving in fog. So why should we, thank you, why should we think that poetry can impact thinking or knowledge about the environment? First, all known cultures produce poetry, just as all cultures have religion and language. The first known author to sign her work, Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon of Akkadian, which is located in present-day Iraq, was a poet, writing in about 2300 BCE, Enheduanna composed poems to the goddess Inanna. So since the dawn of history, poetry has been an important medium that people use to express ideas and emotions and share their thoughts. Second, ever since poets have been writing, they have been intuitively linking an awareness of the environment to their quest for the divine. I'm going to read a few verses that were written by Sappho in the 7th century BCE. Come to me, Crete, come to me from Crete, to this holy temple, to the apple grove, the altars smoking with frankincense. Cold water ripples through apple branches, the whole place shadowed in roses. From the murmuring leaves, deep sleep descends. Where horses graze on the meadow blooms spring flowers, the wind breathes softly. Here, Cyprus, after gathering, pour into golden cups, nectar lavishly mingled with joys. And that was translated by Diane Rayer. And children too have an intuitive appreciation of nature. The former US poet laureate Robert Haas founded an organization called River of Words to promote children's environmental awareness and literacy through the study and practice of poetry and art. So I'm going to read a poem now by a child who participated in River of Words. It's called My Trip to the Hudson River. Footprints all around. Rabbit, deer, dog, coyote, squirrel, wild turkey. Eyes watching all around. Fog and distance, rocks on the shore. Sounds of crows in the background. Smell of snow in the air. Water sits calm and quiet. Fog disappearing slowly. Buds in the tulip trees. Sound of footsteps in the snow, shadows of the trees in the water. And that was by Devin Felter when he was 12 years old. I believe that poetry can be taken a step further in the study of the environment. It can be used not only just to communicate appreciation and awareness of nature, but also to promote understanding of relevant scientific concepts and issues. I've tried to do this in my poem, History of the Biosphere, which I will now read. History of the Biosphere. At first, no redwoods scraped the sky with pointed leaves. No globular cones on ultimate twigs turned slowly from green to brown as they ripened. And no calliope hummingbirds with red streaked throats and slender beaks probed the necks of tubular flowers. There was no oxygen, just a boiling sea where gases streamed from the Earth's core. Millennia passed and membranes formed on rocks until self-replicating sacs were cells insensate, sulfur metabolizing. The Earth cooled and countless generations of cells tumbled through the centuries. Then chloroplasts exhaled oxygen at last over oceans and land. The seas filled with sponges, anemones, and corals where crabs could hide and brightly colored fish could practice dances to attract mates. Long before the first uncertain creatures crept out to deposit eggs in crystalline sand. Now ribosomes and chromosomes repeat the story, and humans with neurons tangled like a rainforest and 3 billion nucleotides lined up in their DNA, gather round the fire to listen while the sky darkens with carbon and the planet with its orchids, figs, rubber trees, calliandras, and ferns, under canopies dense with hanging lianas, trembles as it burns and burns. So this poem combines an overview of the evolution of life on Earth with a description at the end of a burning rainforest. And the questions I hope to raise are, is this the outcome we really want? Should this be the culmination of billions of years of evolution? History of the biosphere illustrates another point that I want to make. One concerning the process for writing an environmental poem. This particular poem is based on an idea, not on direct observation of nature. I did not directly observe either the evolution of life on Earth or a burning rainforest in Brazil. These were things that I'd read about and then had the idea to put them together in a poem. This is in contrast to the poem of mine I read earlier, Muir Woods at Night. The Muir Woods poem describes an actual walk that I took at Muir Woods. So it can work either way. An environmental poem can either arise from an idea or it can arise from direct observation of nature. Attitudes toward nature are embedded in cultures. I just finished reading this book. This is an anthology called When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through, an anthology of Native Nations poetry. This book was edited by Joy Harjo. She's our current US Poet Laureate. And needless to say, the environment is a very important issue to Native Americans and other indigenous people worldwide. And it's not a new issue for them. Historically and culturally, indigenous people have revered the earth. And I'll read a brief excerpt from a speech that Chief Seattle gave in 1854. He was a great orator. Indeed, he could be called a poet, and that is why his words are included in Harjo's anthology. This is just a bit of what he had to say. Every part of this country is sacred to my people. Every hillside, every valley, every plain and grove has been hallowed by some fond memory or some sad experience of my tribe. Even the rocks, which seem to lie dumb as they swelter in the sun along the silent seashore in solemn grandeur, thrill with the memories of past events connected with the lives of my people. So in Chief Seattle's worldview, the earth was sacred, and even the rocks were permeated with a kind of consciousness. This is different from the worldview expressed in the Bible, one of our foundational books of Western civilization. And now I'll read from the first page of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 to 29. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree with its seed in its fruit, you shall have them for food. So that's poetry too. Chief Seattle saw the earth itself as divine, whereas the Bible can be interpreted as saying that the divine is separate from earth and that the earth and its creatures were created to serve people. However, I don't think these ideas are necessarily mutually exclusive. If God created the earth and all living things, doesn't it logically follow that everything is infused with the divine, just as Chief Seattle said? And isn't it reasonable to say that our dominion over the earth and God's admonishment to subdue it includes a responsibility for stewardship of the earth. Humans do indeed have that power over nature that's proclaimed in Genesis. We can change the weather, we can wipe out species, and even create new ones. But if this power came from God or not, I believe that it was intended that we use this power wisely, not destructively. Some people have asked me, in fact, more than one person has asked me, is poetry the best way to spread this message? Isn't our time better spent as environmental activists? And to that, I would say that environmental poetry is a type of environmental activism. And we need all of the mediums of communication available to us to share environmental messages. Journalism, scientific discourse, music, political speeches and lobbying, movies, plays, music, art, and yes, poetry. Nothing should be left out. Decades ago, when I first started writing, one of my aunts asked me, "Why do you want to be a writer?" And I said, "Because I want to do something worthwhile for society." She said, "Really? You think you can do something worthwhile as a writer?" Yes, I assured her. "That isn't what I'd do to do something worthwhile," she said. "What would you do?" I asked. She said, "I'd be a politician." I said, "That would work too, but I'm not a politician, I'm a poet." So I use poetry to say what I want about the environment. And as I said, I think we need to use every method of communication available to us. Ruth Nolan and I are not the only anthology editors who've come to this conclusion that that poetry is an important medium for spreading environmental messages. So now I'm going to show you a few other anthologies that I think are particularly good and important. One is, this is called California Fire and Water, a climate crisis anthology. It was edited by Molly Fisk. It just came out this year, and it includes poems by school children as well as poems by adults. And this is Ghost Fishing. This is the subtitle is an eco-justice anthology, and it was edited by Melissa Tukey. Then we have Black Nature, 4 Centuries of African-American Nature Poetry. That was edited by Camille T. Dungy. Here, Poems for the Planet. This was edited by Elizabeth J. Coleman. And this one includes at the back a guide to environmental activism that was written by the Union of Concerned Scientists. Yet another one, the Eco Poetry Anthology. And this was edited by Anne Fisher Worth and Laura Gray Street. This is a huge book. This one is over 600 pages, and it's used as a text in many college courses. Then we have Big Energy Poets. Eco Poetry Thinks Climate Change. And this one was edited by Heidi Lynn Staples and Amy King. So you can see that a lot of people have had this idea of creating an anthology of environmental poetry, and I think it's wonderful because I think the more such anthologies we have, the better. There are names of people that recur. A lot of these, they're poets who have poems in several of these anthologies. A few, to name just a few, these include Camille T. Dungy, Anne Fisher Worth, Brenda Hillman, Jane Hirschfield, and Robert Haas. So what I'm going to do now is read 3 poems from some of these other anthologies, and I'll start with Black Nature. and read a poem called Language by the editor, Camille T. Dungy. Language. Silence is one part of speech, the war cry of wind down a mountain pass another, a stranger's voice echoing through lonely valleys, a lover's voice rising so close, it's your own tongue. These are keys to cipher. The way the high hawk's key unlocks the throat of the sky and the coyote's yip knocks it shut. The way the aspen's bells conform to the breeze while the rapids drum defines resistance. Sage speaks with one voice, pinyon with another. Rock, wind her hand, water her brush, spells and then scatters her demands. Some notes tear and pebble our paths. Some notes gather, the bank we map our lives around. And now I will read a poem from Ghost Fishing, the Eco-Justice Anthology, and I'll read a poem by Anne Fisher Worth, who was one of the editors of the Eco-Poetry Anthology. And this is called Sweet Gum Country. Billy shows us his arm burned by the sun, where pesticides sensitized his skin those years of his childhood playing in Delta cotton fields. A charred hand-sized lozenge marks the tender crease inside his elbow. Alex holds up her chart that shows the sickness and death in her mother's family from cancer in Cancer Alley. She has made red circles for fought, green crosses for died. She has put stars around her name, my pretty dark-haired student. They come to class, my 16 freshmen, and no matter what their topics, they all say, I never knew this. Fords and Chevys that will barely crank one more time are parked in the reeds and slick red mud. Early evening sun pours down on the cypresses and sweet gums. The Tallahatchie swamp at the edge of Marshall County. Turtles poke their heads up, cottonmouths zipper through black water, or stretch out long and bask on the abandoned railroad bridge. Men and women of all ages beguile the hours after work, the idle hours with soft talk or silence, with bamboo poles and battered coolers. They could use the food. They fish for buffalo, catfish, bass, despite the fish advisories, the waters laced with mercury. And I'll read one more poem from these other anthologies. I'm going to read a poem by Jane Hirschfield from California Fire and Water, and this is called Let Them Not Say. Let them not say we did not see it. We saw. Let them not say we did not hear it. We heard. Let them not say they did not taste it. We ate. We trembled. Let them not say it was not spoken, not written. We spoke. We witnessed with voices and hands. Let them not say they did nothing. We did not enough. Let them say, as they must say something, a kerosene beauty, it burned. Let them say we warmed ourselves by it, read by its light, praised, and it burned. So I think there's a lot of powerful environmental poetry out there to be read. Now I'm going to turn to my own newest book of poems. This is called Birds of San Pancho and Other Poems of Place. And this book just came out on November 1st from Blue Light Press. And it contains a lot of eco-poems. Not all of the poems in it are eco-poems, and it also includes ekphrastic poems, and it includes poems about cities, but I'm just going to read some of the eco-poems today to stick with that theme. The book is divided into 2 sections. The first section is called Foreigner, and all of the poems in the first section of the book take place in various countries of Latin America and Europe. And the second section of the book is called Between the Two Shining Seas, and these poems take place in the US. So I'll start out reading a few poems from the first section of the book. I'll first read the title poem of the book, Birds of San Pancho. And this San Pancho is a town in the state of Nayarit, Mexico. A great kiskadee sits on the casa wall, belting its exuberant song above the dusty cobblestone street. The bird is masked like a raccoon, its breast yellow as the butterflies that flit amid hibiscus and bougainvillea. Far from the sea, I'm far from the casa where palms and Maya nut trees grow lushly. A yellow-winged cacique waits in the paperbark tree, the lemony underside of its long tail cascading like silk. It surveys the scene, ignoring the golden-cheeked woodpecker, streak-backed oriole, flycatchers, and scrub euphonia sharing the selva. Farther down the dirt road, where red ants live inside acacia thorns, a pale cow wanders alone, snubbing the fat chachalacas, singing chachalaca as I pass by. It seems the birds are out to cheer me, though I know food and mates are what they're after. A whole flock of orange-fronted parakeets feasts on berries overhead. Later at the lagoon, a great blue heron, a little blue heron, a green heron, a night heron, 2 great egrets, 8 snowy egrets, and 20 cattle egrets gather while brown pelicans dive for fish and the sun's bright disk sinks into the sea. When it disappears, the egrets rise in groups and pairs to settle in 2 coconut palms for the night. Oh, to sit up there too, safe, having eaten my fill, with folded wings, watching over creation. And now I will read 2 poems from Costa Rica. The first one is called Birthday Gifts from the Rainforest, and it takes place in Arenal, Costa Rica. A howler monkey dining in a cecropia tree, a trogon dressed in yellow, blue, and green. His dowdier mate, the blood tree oozing red sap. A river of leafcutter ants carrying bits of leaves much bigger than their bodies to their nest. Antbirds and wrens chattering and flapping. A pygmy squirrel hunched on a branch. Heliconias with leaves like orange beaks. Sleepy hibiscus whose pink pistils stick out from buds that never open. Whip-tailed lizards rushing every which way across the path, rattlesnake plants shaking spiky yellow blossom stalks like beads. A baby viper curled on a leaf, monkey-tail ferns and elephant ear plants, rufous-tailed hummingbirds savoring purple blossoms of porterweed. A palm whose above-ground roots look like huge penises. All the creatures looking down at me, twice as old as I'd like to be, but not yet done with wonder. And this one is called The Real Thing, and it takes place in Palo Verde National Park, Costa Rica. In a boat skimming past red and black mangroves, close packed, leaning over the briny Rio Tampisque, where crocodiles swim, the scales down the middle of their backs breaking the water's murky surface like chains of floating rocks. I think of the Jungle Cruise in Disneyland, my father beside me when I was 8. When the fake crocodile opened its jaws, he said, "How would you like to see the real thing?" I said I would and meant it, but knew I'd never go with him. He feared planes, boats, and the depth of rivers. But now I'm looking into the eyes of a live crocodile in a jungle river. Pale green marbles, the pupils vertical black slits. The crocodile regards me with no apparent interest, while herons dip for fish. Iguanas bask on branches overhead, and roseate spoonbills splash the sky with pink. Howler monkeys stay high in the trees, but white-faced capuchins crowd around the boat when we stop. One climbs on the roof, another poops from a limb a few feet away. It hits the water with a splash. Daddy, who put so many ideas in my head, I hope you're looking down from heaven at this monkey relieving itself beside me, then popping a big black spider into its mouth. It's the real thing. And next I'll read a poem from the Galapagos, and this is called What the Tortoises Know. On Genovesa, as my husband lay on the beach of Darwin Bay, a sea lion came to sniff his toes, and a red-footed booby sitting with her chick in a mangrove nearby let me get kissing close. On North Seymour, the frigate birds weren't fazed by me, and a young blue-footed booby was intrigued by my walking stick. On Espanola, the sand was so thick with iguanas, it was hard not to step on them. The guide explained that the animals here don't fear us, hawks and short-eared owls being the only predators evolution has bred them to know. They first saw humans with guns and bows just 500 years ago. But giant tortoises who live to be 150 years old have seen how we kill to make boxes and combs so heads and legs would draw into shells at the sound of a loud voice, and they grow still as clean-picked bones. And now I'll read a few poems from the second part of the book, of some poems that take place in the US. This is called What Flows into the Gulf of Mexico. Melted snow from the crests of the Rockies rushes past pinyon pines, limber pines, lodgepole pines, corkbark firs, ponderosas, gathering silt as it reaches bur oaks, cottonwoods, staghorn sumacs, silver maples, passes prairie cordgrass, winds through cattails, duckweed, skunk cabbage, finally to mingle in the Mississippi with water draining from 31 states where hunter-gatherers lived with bison herds for 10,000 years. Now the river carries oven cleaner, human feces and caffeine, medical residue from hospitals and laboratories, scouring powder and soap from millions of houses, antibiotics from all the cattle ranches in the Midwest, solvents from farm machinery plants, pesticides from corn and soybean fields, ingredients used to make plastic, enough estrogen from birth control pills to bend the genders of fish, thousands of tons of herbicides, fertilizers that cause algae to form massive green carpets in the Gulf, which leads to an explosion of bacteria that decompose algae and kill everything in an area the size of Massachusetts each year. All this even before 206 million gallons of oil from the Deepwater Horizon blowout, before hundreds of thousands of gallons of oil dispersant containing chemicals that destroy red blood cells and cause cancer. It all enters the shimmering, translucent bodies of arrowworms and dinoflagellates consumed by oysters, the algae scooped up and eaten by shrimp, the crabs that crush mollusks and shrimp with their chelipeds, the sea bass whose stout jaws clamp down on any smaller creature. Of course, it's in our blood and hair and fingernails. It floats in our hearts and permeates our brains as surely as hope or anger. It's in your body and mine, these molecules that cling like lovers to our bones. And next I will read a sonnet called Watching the Grebes. This takes place at Clear Lake, California. A taut blue sky is stretched above the lake, which glitters like a rippling field of stars in early sun. Two western grebes take a morning swim, but they don't go far before they plunge. When they emerge, beaks filled with weeds, they stand. It's time to dance. Long necks held high, black crests and white beak cheeks side by side. They glide as though on skis, advance toward us. Standing on the balcony, we see the shining wake they leave behind. My love, I'd like to be as easy as the grebes, who seem content to find a dancing partner as the new day starts, a dark-winged bird that knows the steps by heart. And we'll go to another lake now. This one is called at Lake Tahoe. Granite mountains, dense with white firs, lodgepole pines and ponderosas, rise abruptly from the lake's blue bowl, so deep its waters could cover all of California and Nevada. The Washos, who lived here 10,000 summers, named it Lake in the Sky because it reflected clouds, sunset, and stars. They caught lahontan trout in the lake, mountain whitefish in icy streams. On the other side of the continent, my Wampanoag ancestors were gathering cranberries, covering their summer homes with cattail mats, baking clams, drying corn, and fishing for salmon off Cape Cod. The Washos used only fallen trees for homes they would dismantle before leaving Lake in the Sky each winter. In fall, they gathered pinyon pine nuts to eat until spring. This was before white people came and cut down the pinyon pines to build their houses, dynamited the mountains in search of silver and gold, and claimed the fish. Now, a paddle boat with 3 decks takes tourists on cruises of Lake Tahoe. Yet in summer, Washos still do the pine nut dance, and Wampanoags do the grass dance to keep the world in balance and remind us that the earth is living, every rock is sacred, and every tree and salmon has a soul. And this one is called Redwoods and Rain. I am redwoods and rain, stomata like green leaves opening, like green lips opening for a kiss on the underside of leaves. A leopard leaping high as a house, its fur glowing with black gold roses. I am untold generations of ancestors back to the ones who painted with charcoal on the walls of caves and hunted aurochs and mammoths across vast, uncharted plains. I'm also the grandchildren whose small hands I hold and the great-grandchildren who might or might not be born. My elements come from supernovae blown light years across space. I am mostly water, an ocean of matter and energy grown conscious. The fate of the earth is my domain. I am slime mold and diatoms, bluebirds and dolphins, daisies, archaebacteria, redwoods, and rain. So I think environmental poetry can catalyze meaningful discussion, not only about the climate crisis and other environmental issues, but also of what we can do to slow and even reverse adverse environmental changes. I trust that such discussion can lead us away from despair toward a belief that we have the power to save both California and the planet Earth for future generations. It is in our best interest to stem global warming before our cities are engulfed in fires, floods, and rising seas, and to protect the forests that produce the oxygen we breathe. The time to do something is now, because there is no planet B. So thank you very much for your attention. And I'm happy to, thank you. I'm happy to enter into a discussion and hear your comments and questions.
Anyone have a comment, just raise your hand. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm not a poet, but I am a writer and a scientist and a lover of nature. In the chat, yes, in the
I was
chat.
wondering if he was going to finish that.
in the chat, Bob Garfinkel reminded us that some ancient scientific writings were actually in poetry. And that makes me think of perhaps the longest of them all, Of Nature by Lucretius, which is the poetic explanation of Epicurean philosophy and science as known at the time. So, and thank you for reading Sappho and identifying the hymn to Inanna. There has been a long, long connection between poetry and science, and thank you for continuing it.
Oh, thank you.
Don't forget, you're muted, everyone. Nancy?
Do
There
you
you go.
prefer Lucy or Lucille?
Call me Lucy.
Okay, Lucy. What was the name of the woman who first signed her poem? The one that was the prayer to Inanna? Do you know?
Enheduanna. Enheduanna. Enheduanna.
Okay. I'd love to see that. I'd love to read that one. And I love the poem that you read by Sappho. That was just absolutely gorgeous.
Fantastic. Bob?
Yeah, Lucy, we have a long history of poetry in the California Writers Club. Lots and lots of poets over the years. One of our co-founders was Ina Colbreth, who her uncle was Smith, who founded the Church of Latter-day Saints. So her father was his brother, I forget his, Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Smith, yeah.
She came to California after her father died. Her mother was forced to marry Brigham Young. Not happy about that, and they escaped from Salt Lake City to California. Actually, from was the place in Illinois where they first came from. So she was one of our co-founders, and in the 1930s, she helped to edit these books that the California Writers Club put out of just poetry from 1930 through 1933. She was living in San Francisco when the earthquake hit. Her personal library was totally destroyed. And in 1911, finally, the California Writers Club held a dinner for her. Admission was to bring your own book. And so they had 300 authors bringing their books. Well, she was the librarian, one of the first librarians in the Oakland Public Libraries. And one of her claims to fame is she gave the first library cards to Isadore Duncan and Jack London.
Ah,
Very impressive.
Friend of Jack London until he died in 1916. And so we do go back. So I don't know if you belong to California Writers Club, but you would certainly be welcome. Now, you mentioned the one poem about the tortoises living 150 years. There is a tortoise on Elba, which was the island where Napoleon was imprisoned at the end after Waterloo. The tortoise was already old when Napoleon was there. They've estimated it to be 25 to 50 years old. That tortoise is still alive. And
wow.
Wonderful.
Napoleon was on that island almost 200 years, about 205 years or so ago. So that tortoise is probably
Wow.
well over 250 years old.
Wow.
And it's still, there's a Lynn or a motel, and the tortoise roams around on the grass at the hotel. So they know it's the same tortoise.
Amazing.
Yeah, they do live.
That's
Along here. But thank you very much. I enjoyed
Thank you.
reading. We don't do enough poetry in the world today. It's not as popular as it was 100 years ago, but it's still an integral part of the California Writers Club.
Good.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Hey, Ann, you're muted. So go ahead and unmute, and then we can hear you. There you go.
So I have several comments. I was wondering, Lucy, if you had the poem about all the chemicals flowing into the ocean, and I was wondering if you would consider rewriting it with brand names.
Good luck.
Okay. Joking aside, I'm really interested. In fact, I'm kind of wanting to write a series of essays about what I'm calling eco-cult lit, because or eco-cult poetry, because I really appreciate writers who write about nature and all the wonderful things about nature, but what really interests me more is how humans have screwed things up and, our culpability. And so I'm looking for like old, it's hard to find older, writings that are in that vein. But interestingly enough, one of the very earliest is, in fact, I think it's the oldest surviving work. It's written on cuneiform tablets, and it was discovered in Mesopotamia. And it's called the Epic of Gilgamesh. I have not read it, but apparently, there's a kind of a nature boy and in the story, and there's a lot of talk about the destruction of the forests. So I'm really fascinated by that topic, but there seems to be kind of a dearth of that as we move through history until we get to, well, of course, the Romantic poets, and then nature becomes predominant again. But I just revisited The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Coleridge, and what a fascinating poem that is, because, I don't know if you guys remember the poem, but
Wonderful.
the ship is in a really bad way. There's ice, and the albatross leads the ship out of this horrible situation, but the ancient mariner kills the albatross for no apparent reason. He shoots it with his bow, and everybody aboard ship perishes. And it's kind of it's a moral tale. It's like, yes, absolutely. And so this ancient mariner is left to go around and tell everybody what has happened. So it's I think it can easily be read as a warning to others, like, you've got to treat nature with respect, or this is what's going to happen. So, but anyway, if any of you are aware of any ancient writings, I would be, you could pass them on to Lucy and then she could get to me or something, because I don't mean necessarily ancient, but I mean, you know, stuff maybe pre-1500s that deals with our, you know, our culpability, the way that we have not done right by nature. So, and then just, yeah, go ahead.
I
Yeah.
think Newt was.
One area you might want to look in that I found a few references to, but you know, at the time it wasn't really on my radar, so to speak. Ancient Greece, when you look at mythology, it's absolutely full of people in woods and forests. Apparent, and then later on, in another one, I read a reference to the goats, and they were talking about how, you know, goats were the bringers of change, because when they brought them to Greece, they wiped out the forests and the woods. And you know, this, I know that there are references to it as an example of an ecological loss. So that might be a topic that you could look, because this is, you know, back in Roman times they were discussing, you know, they were talking about that.
Okay, I'll check out the goats.
You call it tradition.
And
Nancy?
you might also take a look at Hildegard von Bingen. Hildegard von Bingen, she's German-ish. I don't know that Germany was in existence then, but she was a very famous nun during her time, the late 1100s, early 1200s. She started 2 convents. She was consulted by all of the royalty in the area, you know, in Europe during that time period. She was in her 70s, traveling around, walking. She did a walking tour and spoke in public, which was against the law for women. She fell into obscurity for a very long time, and then last century, we rediscovered her. She was a musician, a poetess, just everything you can think of. She was kind of like the rock star. She was the rock star.
A playwright and an artist. A playwright, a graphic artist.
She's credited for writing the first, well, sort of the precursor to opera. And she, in her, I think it was Ordo Fortunum is the name of the piece that she did. All of her nuns sang the wonderful parts, and then one of the priests sang the one male in the opera was the devil. So that was kind of like, you know, the perfect part for him, I think. But anyway, she is if you're not aware of her, she is somebody who wrote wonderful poetry, and lots and lots of it was about a spiritual connection to the environment. She was also like a doctor. I mean, people came from all over to consult her about their physical issues. I mean, she was the polymath of her age. So I would recommend her to all of you if you're not familiar with her.
She's also a touchstone because she was in correspondence, especially with all of the famous women of her age, but with a lot of scientists. So yeah, it's kind of a central location for intellectual thought of the time.
A lot of her teachings sort of were lost because she was a woman, but were followed up on by people like Meister Eckhart and other people who you might be more familiar with. Sort of, you know, kind of grew out of her teachings.
Sam had another question. It's not on the same topic, but Sam, go ahead. He wanted to know about using names of local businesses. Sam, you're mute.
Yes, I was just wondering if it's okay to use the name of a local business in a short story that I want to send out for publishing.
Anyone?
Tish put something in the chat room for you to take a look at.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was about product. This is about the name of a business.
I
It's a
think
little
it's
different.
okay.
If it's a mom and pop place, go in and ask. They may give you permission.
Okay.
Just get it in writing. Tell them,
Okay, all right.
you know,
Thanks, Nick.
I'm assuming that it's going to be positive, right?
Yeah, it's going to be a
Okay,
positive
good.
portrayal, yeah.
I think it's okay to use the name of a business unless it's something like you're making the owner into a serial killer or
Yeah.
having the restaurant poisoning people. If there's nothing
I mean, yeah.
bad happening, they'll just see it as free advertising.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you hear the word
Okay.
Macy's used a lot. I mean, it's
Sam's Grill is in Dashiell Hammett.
Yeah.
That made them famous.
yeah.
Did I mention that I don't remember that Ina Colbreth was the first California poet laureate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You did on the chat.
Okay. But you cannot copyright a title. So if you want to call someplace in, say, Los Angeles, Joe's Grill, there might be hundreds of Joe's Grills in Los Angeles, or Tom's Place, or the Midnight Bar. No one's going to know who exactly you're talking about
That's true.
unless you're going to do something specific, naming the location, the city, and the streets. Dashiell Hammett also named a lot of streets in San Francisco, especially the alleyway, I forget right offhand, where they now call it Dashiell Hammett Way. And now I've read a book, placed in New York City, and the guy, describing chases, and he's naming, street after street where this guy is being chased. I mean, that's okay, because it really is the nails it down. So go ahead. You're probably going to be okay.
Okay. Can I ask
Okay.
Lucy a question?
Newty.
In a different city.
Yeah. Lucy, do you think that the poems are more effective as a tool on their own, or if they're paired with music? You mentioned James Taylor earlier. He's not exactly the perfect example, but is it more effective to put out just the words, or to do it with a record or something like that?
I think it can work both ways. I mean, some poems I think are work best just as words, and and other poems are reasonably set to music, and the music can be an enhancement. But I think that both music and poems that aren't set to music, poems set to music, it's all important.
Oh no, I absolutely agree with that.
Yeah, and I think maybe some poems are stronger if they're set to music, but I don't think that's necessarily the case for all poems.
Okay, a couple more questions here, Sue.
Thank you. One quick question to Nancy first. What was the name of the lady that you talked about for quite a bit? You said her name once, and I couldn't get it.
Hildegard.
What is it?
Hildegard.
Hildegard.
Von. Hildegard von Bingen. Bingen, I think.
Bingen.
Bingen.
Okay. And when was she writing?
The late 1100s, early 1200s.
It's the era of the Holy Roman Empire.
Okay.
Okay, Nancy had a question, so we'll go with
And
you.
for Lucy, are you planning to do any more anthologies along this line, or do you know of anybody else who is?
I'm not planning to do another anthology along this line in the near future. Maybe in a few years, but other people are doing anthologies, and Anne Corey has work in an anthology that I believe just came out this year. It's called Rewilding. Do you want to tell them a little about that?
Yes, it's Split Rock Press, and the I don't know if if this is an ongoing thing or if it was just a one-time deal, but yeah, it was really cool because I recognized several people in the anthology, several other Alaskan poets. And so we got together and did a little Zoom thing, but
Cool.
yeah, anyway.
What's the name of it, Ann?
Split Rock Press.
And what's the name of the anthology?
Rewilding.
Rewilding?
Rewilding.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and it's funny, you know, because even though I have this strong, you know, I prefer writing that does deal with, as I said, sort of the culpability part of, you know, eco-poetry. But after a while, when you read nothing but that, start to feel a little saturated. And I found myself almost wanting every once in a while, you know, to get a break from it. But there's some really good stuff in there. So good one. I actually.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. So yeah, I actually edited an anthology myself. It's called Alaskans on the Environment, and it's both poetry and prose, and it's just dealing with environmental issues in Alaska. And just before I sign off, I mean, one last thing. I don't know if you're aware of the good news from none other than the Trump administration, but the Pebble Mine project has almost officially shut down. I mean, the Army Corps of Engineers said, no, it's not good enough. The permit was denied.
Yay!
Oh!
Yeah, it's like Trump did something good, you know?
Yeah.
It's good that he did. He just took away the protections from a lot of the wild birds, including red-tailed hawk. They expect billions of birds to die as a result. He's trying to get that passed in the next month.
Yes.
Okay, let me, we just have a few more minutes. I've got Mary Kate, I got Tony, and I got Sue that have questions, and then we'll need to draw it to a conclusion at that point. Go ahead, Mary Kate.
Okay.
Mary Kate.
The Hildegard of Bingham, Matthew Fox, which was a Franciscan priest, is doing a whole series on Hildegard of Bingham. And the second thing is, can I read my granddaughter's poem eventually?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yes. Go ahead. Okay. There's a bridge breaking, a sound escaping, an appetite for change, but a slipping grasp for things to stay the same. An earthquake, the tension building between tectonic plates, a calm before a storm, a silence before a swarm, magma reaching the peak, the burst before a shriek, a slip before a fall, the heat before a brawl. And I've experienced it all. I can predict when the earth is about to shift, whether a wind turn or explosion, I will see the omen. It's not bad, just new. And I can't wait for the one to come true. I've been waiting at the gates for them to shatter so I can escape. Once they do, there's no going back to what we once knew. I live in the tornado center. It is my only purpose and endeavor. My soul is inside, begging for me to meet its eye. When the sky is pink and the grass is blue, that's how I know you will meet me too. Travel to the lost lands, and I'll be there as it turns to sand. Yes, I've been living on this edge. I was raised here and never fled. It was dark for some time, but I befriended anticipation, and now I'm fine. Waiting for the shoe to drop, ties the stomach in knots. Not anymore. This fun never stops. I had fear, but in this moment it disappeared. I'm strapped in, so tell me when this roller coaster will begin. Your world about to come tumbling down. Grab some popcorn, let's stick around. It's amusing that you're more afraid of your own disaster that's about to invade. The birds are flying. The moon is rising, and yourself you're still surprising. I grew up under a tidal wave. Below your brook, I had to stay. But you dug your own grave. I chased fires, taking pictures and notes as I desire. My new profession. I used to close my eyes without question, hiding in the attic. But now the lightning has me ecstatic. You would hide from your demons if you could, but there goes the snap of the wood. Familiar to me, I'm so much stronger than you will ever be. Blood in my body is boiling, something that you've been avoiding. Instead of creating a tragedy, the movement is a masterpiece, not your shredded circumstance. This is a ballet dance. No eggshells, just spells. No destruction, just bells. Your bridge is about to break, and underneath is my Swan Lake.
That's Celeste, right?
That's Celeste, yes.
Yes, right there.
Thank you. Thank you, Grandma.
Very nice, Celeste. Thank you.
Sweet.
Wonderful.
Would that be something we could publish in InkSpot?
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. I'd be honored.
Send it to me.
Okay, will do.
Let me interrupt.
chat
We
room,
have
you'll find
a
my email.
request for Lucille's contact information. Could you put the appropriate contact information on the chat, Lucille?
It's
Okay.
already
Yeah.
there. I think.
I've already put my website in there. I can put my email address too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
you're
so there
welcome.
is, Lucille does have a ton of information on chat. Anybody that needs that, it is there now. And but then once we hang up on here, it probably will disappear, I think.
Yeah, and people everyone can save the chat by clicking on those three little dots at the bottom and then select
okay.
chat, and it downloads the whole chat onto your computer.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
We're all learning stuff.
Another thought about
Tony, I believe, I'm sorry, guys, go ahead.
Yeah, I
Lucille?
want to say one more thing about poetry and music, that whether a poem is more powerful set to music or not depends not only on the poem, but it also depends on the listener, because different people respond to things differently. And for some people, music reaches them very deeply and emotionally in the way that just words doesn't. Some people respond more to visual things like a painting. So I think that's why we need to use all different methods
Good
of
point.
communication.
Great point. Tony, you had a...
Yeah, this is just a real quickie. I want to cap off something that Bob Garfinkel said about our need for more poetry. This is a very quick line from William Carlos Williams. It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. So he kind of stated the import of it. That's all I have to say.
Very good. Okay, I was going to have Sue. Sue, are you still out there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
You had a question?
I did. I think might be better off to try to contact you, Lucy, but in the very beginning, you were talking about the purpose and how eco-poetry kind of maybe affect change. And you had a reference, you read the poem by Sappho, but I wanted to get the timing down right. I think you said it was 7th century, is that correct?
Yes.
And also, you had mentioned, since the dawn of history, but you went into a little more detail. And also your second thing was referring to a step further, understanding our environmental issues, I guess is what you were getting at. And the reason I'm asking these more, these kind of questions rather than the poetry is that I'm writing a summary of your talk today. And so I want to get some of these features as to why we want to study eco-poetry and get it down correctly.
Okay, well, I agree that, we can communicate by email. Send me an email.
Okay,
send me what you have, and then I can add to it.
And so I record everything, so I'll send you a link to the Dropbox link to the recording after I create it.
Oh, all right, that's okay too then. it's just hard to get everything down and at this, so.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I will say we can't learn, I don't think we can learn everything we need to know about the environment from eco poetry, but I think we can get find out a lot from it, be emotionally moved by it, and it can inspire us to go out and, learn more.
Well, exactly. And like someone just said, if we all react to input differently, whether it's poetry or music or a novel, and I think poetry is one of the beautiful ways, and I think adding it to music would be awesome. But like I said, some of us, like myself, need to touch, feel, smell, and see everything to learn. So whatever different way I can get the information, it seems to work. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and draw this to a conclusion here. It's a little bit after 4, and is there any last comments before we sign off? I want to just remind everybody they can make it for the 12th at